Good days, everybody. Nice to meeting you today, even though it is online lecture today. My title today is The Case Studies of Korean Shipping Policies, means the maritime transportation policies. Let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Jinsoo PARK, the Emeritus Professor of the Korea Maritime and Ocean University. I have graduated Nautical Science Department from the Korea Maritime University in 1977. Then I start my seafaring careers from 77 as a deck officer. Start from third mate until chief mate, and I stopped the sea service at 1981 and started my shore job at the shipping companies from the 91 to 96. Then fortunately I could join to the university in late 1986. Then I have worked for more than 30 years in the Korea Maritime University until my retirement in 2019. It's just last year. So I am the retired professor. So altogether, I spent 10 years in shipping industry and 32 years in Maritime University. You can find out more details, so my area of teaching and research interest as well. And you can see my email address on there. So if you have any question or if you would like to contact me, please send email to me. The table of content. The lecture starts with introduction. Then I'm going to introduce and explain the important shipping policies in different periods. I divided them into 3 different periods, such as preparation period at the slide from 9 to 14, and then take-up period and maturation period. Finally, I'm going to summarize the main points. However, I do hope to continue to explain the most important driving force in Korean shipping industry. It is the education and training and supply of qualified maritime manpower for the Korean maritime industry in time. That is the most important factor for developing Korean shipping industry. Let's move to next slide. Introduction. So let me introduce the lecture now. You can see the 3 key elements of shipping in this slide. First of all, the ship or vessel is the fundamental hardware which must be secured to run the shipping business. The second factor will require skilled and well-trained manpower or seafarers. Seafarers to operate a ship, maintain the ship, and repair the ship. In addition to the seafarers, management personnel who has expert knowledge and know-how are necessary to conduct and run the shipping business. The third element of shipping would be enough cargo to carry on our fleet, which is heavily dependent on the market condition and national and global economy. I think those 3 factors are the key factors to develop and expand the shipping industry. Therefore, I'm going to introduce the shipping policies in 3 different parts, namely ship-related policies and cargo-related policies and human resource-related policies in each period. Introduction. After the World War II or Second World War, many former colonies gained independence. The newly independent states tried to advance aggressively into shipping industry to achieve self-supporting economy. They are, for example, Korea and West Asian countries and many of African nations. However, unfortunately, most of their attempts were failed and inevitably sustained enormous economic damage. So finally, they gave up the shipping industry. In contrast, there are few successful cases. Now, I'm going to explain the remarkable success story of the development of shipping industry in Korea. Development steps of Korean shipping. I divide the development of shipping, Korean shipping, in three different periods. First, the preparation period during 1945 to the end of 1960s for 15 years. Nothing remains in Korean Peninsula to start shipping business after the World War II and Japanese control period. But it was important time to lay out the foundation for the shipping industry. The second period is take-up period during 1960 to the early of 1980 for 20 years. We made dramatic growth of shipping industry in line with the national economic developments. And third will be maturation period during mid-1980 to the 2016 for about 35 years. The main event in the period are, first, shipping rationalization in 1984. Second, introduce international ship registry in 1998 and tonnage tax system in 2004. Third, global financial crisis from 2008. And finally, the bankruptcy of the biggest Korean shipping company called Hanjin Shipping in 2017. After the Hanjin bankruptcy, Korean shipping industry prepared the shipping reconstruction plan, which is still going on now. Please understand that my lecture is focusing on ocean-going shipping only. I'm not dealing with the domestic shipping business. Only focus on ocean-going shipping. As you know well, the Korea has been ruled by Japan for 36 years, from 1910 to 1945. On the day of 15th August of 1945, Japan has declared unconditional surrender just after the atomic bomb attack on 6th and 9th August. 2 times a bomb attack was there. Therefore, we celebrate the 15th August as National Independence Day. After the independence, the US military government ruled and supported Korea to establish their own government. And finally, Korean government has been founded in 15th August 1948, just 3 years later. In 1945, when Korea independent from Japan, we have only 3 small ocean-going ships of 5,582 gross tons. That is the motor vessel. However, we have 1,647 ships of 77 million deadweight tons in 2019, which is world top 7 shipping nation. The statistic is from the UNCTAD Review of Maritime Transport. Let's see the important policies to develop Korean shipping industry in each steps. Let's start the first step, which is the preparation period during 1945 to 1959 for about 15 years. Preparation period, which is the first step. A few ships are remained from Japan when we independent. And US government grant a lease of some wartime standard ships. They call Liberty ship and Victory ship. I'm going to explain more about the wartime standard ship in next slide. However, we have no national capital fund to purchase the ships. Some shipbuilding facilities are remained, but no materials, no expert to design and construct the ship, no technology, no skills at all. It means very difficult to build ships in Korean shipyard. On August 15, 1948, the Korean government was founded. On January 1950, we have established Korean Shipbuilding Corporation, which is state-run shipyard in Busan. Just a few months later, after the establishment of the KSC, Korea Shipbuilding Corporation, the Korean War was broken out, and the war continued for 3 years until July 1953. Consequently, everything has to be suspended and stopped during the war. That ship in the sketch is the Liberty ship, which is the wartime standard cargo ship called Liberty ship. The Liberty ship is a class of cargo ship built in the United States during World War II. It is the British design. Though British in concept, the design was adopted by the United States for its simple and low-cost construction. You see, 18 American shipyards built 2,710 ships between 1941 and 1945. Can you imagine that 3 ships were built in every 2 days? We can say that this is the largest number of ships ever produced to a single design. More than 2,400 Liberty ships survived the war. Of course, of these, 835 made up the post-war cargo fleet. The Greek entrepreneur bought 526 ships, and the Italians bought 98 ships. Besides that, the shipping magnates, including John Frederickson, Aristotle Onassis, Stavros Niarchos, the Goulandris brothers bought 33 ships. And many other families were known to have started their fleet by buying liberty ships. The term liberty-size cargo for about 10,000 long tons, which means 10,200 metric tons, may still be heard in the shipping business. Okay, let's move to another type of the wartime standard ship. It calls Victory ships, which are a class of cargo ship as well, and built in the United States to replace losses caused by German submarines. More modern design, slightly larger than the Liberty ships. The gross tonnage is about 7,200. The length of all is 137.8 meters, and that weight is about 10,600 tons. And more powerful, she is more powerful steam turbine engines, which means she can make higher speed of 15 to 17 knots than Liberty, compared to the Liberty ships. 531 ships were built in 6 American shipyards, and 36 ships served in Korean War. 100 ships served in the Vietnam War. Many will become commercial cargo ships later. I will explain in the last of my lecture one case of the Victory ship were served during the Korean War. All right, let's move to the human resource issues. August 1945, when we independent from the Japan, there were some seafarers to operate the ship who are trained under the Japanese time. But there simply were not enough people to do the ship operation. Therefore, a group of pioneers in shipping tried to establish maritime college in 1945, immediately after the independence. Fortunately, they got the approval from the US military government on the 5th of November 1945 to educate and train seafarers first, even though there are only 3 ships left in Korean Peninsula. However, again, there were no management experts to run the shipping business. So the group of pioneers in shipping has established national shipping company called Korea Shipping Corporation in January 1950 to train the shipping management human resources for the Korean shipping. However, just a few months later, the Korean War was broken out. Consequently, everything has to be suspended and stopped again. Okay, then go to the cargo. The waiver system, there is a Chinese character is there. If you know the Chinese character, you can easily understand what is the waiver system. We introduced the waiver system, which was proposed by Korea Ship Owners Association in 1954, and it is activated in 1960s. Waiver scheme is a kind of protectionism carry our cargo on our fleet. Other similar schemes are cargo preference system in United States of America and cargo reservation for national fleet, and etc. Meantime, the Korea Ship Owners Association was founded in 1954 in spite of the Korean War. Okay, that was the preparation period of the Korean shipping industry for about 15 years. Now let's move to take-up period. Next stage, which is the take-up period during 1960 to the early of 1980 for about 20 years' time. There were too many events in the early of 1960 in Korea. The student demonstration in 1960 led the transfer of the political power to democratic groups. However, we have had a military coup in 1 year later, in 1961, and the change of government regime. You know, the per capita GNI was $83 only in 1961 when the military coup was broken. Yes, so it was consolation in shock that the military leader has a strong conviction for economic development and national well-being. The new government made a strong economic development plan, which is a five-year plan starting in 1962. The 4 times of economic development plan was implemented until 1981. The first EDP, Economic Development Plan, was focused on the promotion of key and basic industries. Whereas the second Economic Development Plan focused on the food self-support and export promotion. Heavy industry and chemical industries are emphasized during the third Economic Development Plan in 1972 to 1976. And the self-sustaining economy is the final goal in the first Economic Development Plan. In 1968, the Korea Shipping Corporation was privatized for more efficient operation of Korean shipping industry. For the government side, we have had a separate maritime administration under the Ministry of Transport in 1976. And the Korea Maritime and Port Administration has played crucial role for the development of Korea maritime industry. You will see the rapid growth of Korean shipping in this slide. Please look at this slide, which is the comprehensive table at a glance. You can find out how fast they have grown in 20 years' time during the 4 times of economic development plans from 1962 to 1981. You can see the whole story of the growth of Korean shipping. We had only 41 ships of about 100,000 gross tons in the beginning of the first economic development plan in 1962. it was nearly doubled at the end of the first economic development plan in 1966. However, we made a significant growth during the third and fourth economic development plan from 1972 to 1981. In terms of number of ships, has grown 13.5 times, but 61 times in terms of gross tonnage. Undoubtedly, it is an extraordinary growth of wonder in such a short period. During 1960 to 68, national and private shipping were coexisted. There was only one national shipping company called KSC, Korea Shipping Corporation, when we began the shipping in 1950s. However, during the coexisting period, private and national, the number of private shipping companies were doubled. 10 to 20 companies in those periods in 1960. Gross ton ratio in 1960, national sector account for 70% of the total fleet. However, the gross tonnage ratio in 1968, the private sector accounts for 77%. Therefore, KSC, Korean Shipping Corporation, was privatized in 1968. Then, how to increase the tonnage in 1960 to 1968? They have secured 6 ships by the government shipbuilding loan during 1962 to 66, and they purchased 10 second-hand vessels from 1965 to 1966. So that's how they can increase the number of tonnages during that period. Okay, that is my lecture number 1. Then I will resume at the second lecture again.